I need my name in the address list. I need 40 dishes for 40 guests, and I need you to remember whose kitchen this used to be." Because she loved her granddaughter more than she loved her own comfort, my wife stood at that stove for 2 straight nights until her knees gave out and her fingers blistered from the hot pans. But when the guests arrived, my daughter-in-law took one look at the spread and said, "This isn't what I asked for. We're taking everyone to Marchetti's instead." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I picked up my phone and I made one call that changed everything by morning. "I don't take it for granted that you're spending your evening with me. Before I tell you what happened in that dining room, tell me who you're here for tonight. Your mother, your father, your grandmother. Leave it below, so I know who's listening." Some details in this story have been adjusted for privacy. Any resemblance to real people is coincidental. I spent 31 years driving a delivery truck for a produce company out of Cleveland, hauling crates of lettuce and tomatoes down I-71 before the sun came up, and in all those years I learned one thing that never changed. You can tell everything about a person by watching what they do with something that was made for them out of love. Some people hold it like it's fragile. Some people treat it like it was owed to them. That Saturday evening, standing in my own dining room with a centerpiece I didn't recognize sitting on my wife's good tablecloth, I felt the second kind of cold settle into my chest, and it didn't leave for 3 days. My name is Walter Higgins. I'm 69 years old. My wife's name is Doreen, and she has run a catering business out of our home kitchen in Lakewood, Ohio, for almost 22 years. Doreen doesn't cook because she has to. She cooks because it is the only language she has ever fully trusted. When our son Marcus couldn't sleep as a boy, she didn't sing to him. She made him warm bread with butter and cinnamon and sat with him until his eyes closed. When my mother was dying, Doreen cooked for the entire wake, 40 people, by herself, because she said it was the one thing she knew how to give that couldn't be taken back once it was given. Marcus married Renata 6 years ago. Renata is smart, sharp, works in marketing for a hotel chain downtown, and for the first 2 years I genuinely liked her. She used to come to Sunday dinner and ask Doreen for recipes, write them down in a little notebook she kept in her purse, tell her she wanted to learn to cook the real way, not the way you learn from a screen. Doreen loved that. She loved having someone in the family who wanted to sit at her elbow and watch her hands work. Something changed after Renata's promotion 2 years ago. I couldn't tell you the exact day it happened, only that the visits got shorter, the compliments got thinner, and somewhere along the way, Renata stopped asking for recipes and started making requests instead. The birthday in question was for our granddaughter, Josephine Marcus, and Renata's daughter, 16 years old, sharp as her mother, gentle as her father. Renata decided she wanted to host the party herself this year, to take some of the load off Grandma, she said, which should have been my first warning, because Doreen had never once considered cooking for her own family a load. 3 weeks before the party, Renata drove over on a Tuesday evening with a printed spreadsheet. Not a handwritten list, a spreadsheet, laminated, with columns for dish name, dietary restriction, and presentation notes. 40 dishes, 40, for 40 guests, which meant Renata expected my wife to prepare an entire dish, individually, for every single person walking through that door, plus extras for what she called grazing options along the side tables. "I know it's a lot," Renata said, setting the laminated sheet on our kitchen table the way you'd set down a bill, "but you're the best there is, Doreen. Everyone always says so, and it's Josie's sweet 16. She only gets one." Doreen picked up the spreadsheet and read it the way she reads everything. Slow, careful, her lips moving slightly over each line, like she was already tasting it. I watched her face while she read. I know that face. It's the face she made when Marcus broke his arm, falling off the shed roof, worry underneath, calm on top, because somebody in the room has to be steady. "Stuffed mushrooms, 3 varieties," she read aloud. "Seared scallops with saffron cream. Individual beef Wellingtons, medium rare, 22 portions." She looked up. "Renata, this is a wedding menu. It's a milestone birthday," Renata said, like that answered it. "You've done bigger for strangers at your catering jobs. I've done bigger with a paid staff of 6 and 3 days' notice," Doreen said quietly. "Not alone in this kitchen, with 2 weeks." Renata smiled the way she smiles when she's already decided the conversation is over. "You always say that, and you always pull it off. That's kind of your whole thing, Doreen. I really think you can do it. Josie would be so disappointed if we scaled back. I should have said something right then. I've replayed that moment more times than I can count, and I keep landing on the same truth. I stood in my own kitchen and watched my son's wife hand my wife of 41 years a spreadsheet demanding 40 individually prepared dishes with 2 weeks' notice. And I said nothing, because some old, tired part of me still believed that staying quiet was the same thing as keeping the peace in the family. I have since learned how wrong that belief was, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Doreen said yes. Of course she said yes. She has never once in 41 years turned down a chance to feed the people she loves, even when the people she loves stopped noticing the difference between a gift and an assignment. The 2 weeks that followed were the hardest I'd seen her work since her catering business first got off the ground in her 40s, back when we needed the extra income, and she was building a client list one wedding at a time. She started ordering ingredients in bulk, standing over spreadsheets of her own grocery lists broken down by prep day, oven schedules mapped out on a legal pad taped to the refrigerator. I watched my wife, 66 years old, plan a 40-dish menu with military precision because she refused to let her granddaughter's birthday be anything less than perfect, even if the woman who requested it would never understand what that perfection cost. The last 2 nights before the party, Doreen didn't sleep. Not a wink either night. I sat with her in the kitchen at 2 in the morning on the final night, drinking coffee I didn't need just so she wouldn't be alone with the ovens and the timers and the silence. Her hands were raw by then, a burn along the inside of her left wrist from a sheet pan she'd pulled too fast, red and shiny under the kitchen light. She wrapped it in a dish towel and kept working. I asked her to stop, to rest for even 20 minutes, and she looked at me with an exhaustion so deep it had gone quiet, the kind that doesn't complain anymore because complaining takes energy it doesn't have left to spend. "I'm almost there, Walt," she said. "Josie's going to walk into that dining room, and it's going to be the most beautiful thing she's ever seen. That's all I want." At 4 in the morning, plating the last of the beef Wellingtons, she looked over at me and said something I haven't been able to shake since. "You know what I keep thinking about? I keep thinking about the year Marcus turned 16 and I made him a 2-layer chocolate cake because that's all we could afford, and he told everyone at school it was the best cake in Ohio. I keep thinking, when did it stop being enough to just be good? When did everything need to be this much?" I didn't have an answer for her. I still don't. Not really. I just held her hand, the one that wasn't burned, and told her the food was going to be extraordinary, because it was. By 6 the next evening, our dining room and the rented tent in the backyard looked like something out of a magazine. 40 dishes, each one labeled with a small handwritten card in Doreen's careful cursive, arranged across 3 long tables draped in white linen. The beef Wellington was golden and perfect. The scallops sat in their saffron cream like something plated for a photograph. Individual charcuterie boards for each guest, hand-arranged, not a single grape out of place. She had done it. Every item on that impossible spreadsheet, done, and done beautifully, on 2 hours of sleep across 2 days, and a burn she never stopped to properly treat. Marcus came in around 5:30, saw the spread, and stopped dead in the doorway. "Mom," he said, and his voice cracked a little. "Mom, I don't even know what to say. This is incredible." That was the last good moment of the evening. Renata arrived at 6:15 with a caterer's assistant she'd apparently hired on the side. I didn't know about that arrangement until later, carrying 2 trays of store-bought appetizers from a downtown restaurant, the kind that come on branded platters with the restaurant's logo printed on the doily. She set them down at the head of the food tables, right in the center, displacing 2 of Doreen's dishes to the side to make room. Then she walked the length of the tables, slowly, the way you'd inspect a hotel buffet you weren't impressed by, and she said, loud enough for the guests already arriving behind her to hear, "This isn't what I asked for at all. Where's the presentation I sent? This looks like a church potluck, not a sweet 16. She picked up one of the charcuterie boards, turned it over as if checking for a flaw, and set it back down with a small, dismissive shake of her head. "I already called Marchetti's. They can seat 40 of us in 20 minutes. We're doing dinner there instead." This, she gestured at the 3 tables, had 2 nights of my wife's blistered hands and sleepless devotion. "This can stay out for people to pick at, I guess, if anyone wants it." The room went quiet in that specific way. A room goes quiet when everyone heard something they wish they hadn't. Josephine, standing near her mother in a new dress, looked mortified, her eyes going straight to her grandmother. Doreen stood very still, a serving spoon still in her hand, and for one long moment, she didn't say anything at all. She just looked at the tables at every dish, every card, every hour, and then she looked at me. I have loved that woman for 41 years, and I have never once seen her look smaller than she looked in that moment. I didn't argue with Renata. I want to be honest about that, because I know some people watching this wanted me to grab that microphone she'd rented and say something loud and righteous right there in front of everyone. I didn't. I've never been a loud man. 31 years driving a truck alone at 4 in the morning teaches you to keep most things inside until you're sure what to do with them. So I walked outside, stood by the rental tent poles where nobody could see my face, and I called the one person I knew would tell me the truth about what I was feeling. His name is Otis. We worked the same loading dock for almost 2 decades before I moved to long-haul driving, and he's been the closest thing I have to a brother since my own passed 11 years ago. Otis, I said, she just humiliated Doreen in front of 40 people and took everybody to a restaurant instead. Otis didn't say anything for a moment. Then, Walt, you still standing in that backyard? Yeah. Take a picture, he said. Right now, before anybody clears those tables. Take a picture of every dish on that table, and then you post it. Tell people exactly what happened. Don't soften it. Don't make it polite for her sake. And then what? And then you let this town decide what 40 dishes made with 2 nights of somebody's love is worth. Because I'll tell you right now, it's worth more than a table at Marchetti's. I walked back inside. Nobody noticed me. They were all filing out the front door, Renata leading the way, Marcus trailing behind, looking like a man caught between 2 people he loved and unable to figure out how to stand in both places at once. Josephine hesitated at the door, looked back at her grandmother one more time, and I saw something in that girl's face that told me she understood exactly what her mother had just done, even if she didn't have the words for it yet. I took the photograph. All 3 tables, every dish, the little handwritten cards still standing upright, untouched. The steam still rising faintly off the Wellingtons in the cooling evening air. Then I went and found Doreen sitting alone at the kitchen table, the burn on her wrist finally uncovered, staring at nothing. "I'm sorry, Walt," she said. "I don't even know what I'm apologizing for. I just feel like I should be." "You have nothing to apologize for," I told her. "Not one thing. I need you to hear that." I sat down at our old laptop at the kitchen table, the photograph already uploading, and I typed for almost 15 minutes, deleted half of it twice, and then finally stopped editing myself and wrote it exactly the way it happened. My wife is 66 years old. She has run a small catering business out of our home for over 20 years, feeding this town's weddings, funerals, and birthdays with more care than most restaurants I've eaten in. 2 nights ago, my daughter-in-law handed her a spreadsheet demanding 40 individually prepared dishes for our granddaughter's 16th birthday, with 2 weeks' notice. My wife didn't sleep either night. She burned her wrist at 4 in the morning and kept working because she loves her granddaughter more than she loves her own comfort. Tonight, my daughter-in-law took one look at the finished spread, called it a church potluck in front of 40 guests, and took everyone to a restaurant instead. Not one dish was touched. I'm posting this because somebody in this family needed to see what quiet love actually costs, even if she never will. I hit post before the part of me that always softens, things could catch up to my hands. By the time I looked up, Doreen had gone quiet in the particular way she goes quiet when she's trying not to cry in front of me. Because 41 years in, she still thinks I need protecting from her tears more than she needs to shed them. I didn't check my phone again that night. I turned it face down on the nightstand and lay awake next to my wife, listening to her breathe unevenly beside me. And I thought about every year I'd watched her give more than anyone asked her to give and receive less than she deserved in return. By 6 the next morning, my phone had more notifications than I'd ever seen on it in my life. I don't fully understand how these things spread. Otis tried to explain it to me once. Something about people sharing things that make them feel something. And apparently what I'd written had made a lot of people feel something. The post had thousands of comments by breakfast. Strangers from towns I'd never heard of, sharing their own stories of mothers and grandmothers who fed whole families and got handed criticism instead of thanks. But it was the knock at our door at 9 that morning that I'll remember for the rest of my life. It was a woman named Carol Ann, who ran the flower shop 2 streets over, someone Doreen had known for years but never particularly close with, standing on our porch holding a casserole dish. "I saw your post," she said. "I don't have $40 to spend on flowers to say I'm sorry, but I've got a chicken and rice bake, and I figured your wife's earned one night where somebody cooks for her instead." Behind Carol Ann, coming up the walk, was a man I recognized from the hardware store on Detroit Avenue, carrying 2 pies. Behind him, a young couple I'd never met at all, holding a bag of takeout from the Thai place downtown, saying they'd read the post on their lunch break and couldn't stop thinking about it. By 11 that morning, our front porch looked like a potluck of its own. 12 or 15 households worth of neighbors and near strangers, all of them there for the same reason, to make sure Doreen Higgins understood, in a way her own daughter-in-law had failed to, that what she gives this world does not go unnoticed by everyone. Doreen stood in our doorway in her robe, hand pressed over her mouth, crying the kind of tears that come from being seen after a long time of feeling invisible. She hugged every single person on that porch. She invited every single one of them in. And by noon, my dining room, the same room that had held 40 untouched dishes less than 18 hours earlier, was full again. This time with people eating, laughing, telling Doreen how much her post had moved them, asking for her recipes the way Renata used to, back before she stopped. Marcus called at 1 in the afternoon. I let it ring twice before I answered, not out of cruelty, but because I needed the extra few seconds to decide what kind of father I wanted to be in that conversation. "Dad," he said, and his voice was already breaking before he got the second word out. "Dad, I saw it. I saw what you wrote." Renata saw it too. Everyone at her office has seen it. Her boss has seen it. She's dad. She's a wreck. I don't even know how to look at her right now. "I didn't write it to wreck anybody, son," I said. "I wrote it because your mother needed somebody in this family to finally say out loud what she's been carrying quietly for years, and I've spent too long letting her carry it alone." There was a long silence on the line. Then Marcus said something that told me my son, whatever his faults, still had his mother's decency somewhere underneath the years of looking away. I should have said something a long time ago. Every time Renata got short with Mom, every time she made a comment about her cooking being too old-fashioned for company, I told myself it wasn't worth the fight. I let it happen so many times I stopped, even noticing it happening. "I did the same thing," I told him. 31 years driving a truck taught me plenty about patience, but it also taught me how to go quiet and call it peace. Your mother paid for both our silences, Marcus. Yours and mine. He came over that evening. Alone. Renata didn't come. Not that night. And honestly, I wasn't sure I wanted her to. Marcus sat at our kitchen table, the same table where his mother had wrapped her burned wrist in a dish towel 2 nights before, and he cried in a way I hadn't seen him cry since he was a boy. And he apologized to his mother for 20 straight minutes without once trying to explain it away or soften it for himself. Doreen forgave him. She has always forgiven easily. It's one of the things about her I've loved longest and understood least, because I don't forgive nearly as fast or as fully as she does. But she told him something that night I think mattered more than the forgiveness itself. "I don't need an apology as much as I need you to actually see me, Marcus," she said. "Not the version of me that solves problems and fills tables. Me, your mother, who is tired, and who is allowed to be tired, and who would still get up at 4 in the morning for any one of you, but who needs, every once in a while, for somebody to get up at 4 in the morning for her instead." It took Renata 3 more days to come to our house. When she finally did, she came alone, without Marcus, without an explanation prepared in advance, and she stood in our doorway, looking smaller than I had ever seen her look, smaller even than Doreen had looked, standing over those 40 untouched dishes. "I've spent 3 days reading what people wrote about me," she said. "Strangers. People who don't even know me, calling me every name you can imagine. And the worst part, Doreen, is that most of it was true. I did that. I stood in your dining room in front of everyone and I made you feel like 2 nights of your life were worth less than a reservation." Doreen didn't rush to comfort her. That surprised me. My wife has spent her whole life rushing to comfort people before they've even finished asking for it. But this time, she let Renata sit in the discomfort of her own words for a moment before she spoke. "I don't think you understand what it costs a person to be told, over and over, gently and not so gently, that what they give isn't quite enough," Doreen finally said. I've spent 20 years building a business on the belief that food is how I say the things I don't have other words for. When you criticized that spread, you weren't just criticizing dinner, Renata. You were telling me the language I speak in isn't worth listening to. Renata cried then, real crying, not the composed kind. I don't even know why I did it. I think I've spent so long trying to prove I belong in this family on my own terms, something that's mine, not just Doreen's daughter-in-law who married in. And somewhere in trying to prove that, I made you the thing I had to be better than, instead of the person I was lucky enough to learn from. That's not an excuse. And Doreen told her so, plainly, without cruelty, but without letting her off the hook either. But it was, I think, the first true thing Renata had said to any of us in over a year. And truth, even late and imperfect, has to count for something if a family's going to survive. They didn't fix it all that day. Families don't work that way, whatever the ending of a story might make you want to believe. But Renata came back the following Saturday, and the one after that, and by the third week, she was standing at Doreen's elbow, in the kitchen again, notebook out, the way she used to years before, asking to be taught rather than demanding to be served. Josephine started coming too, on weekends, learning to roll dough the way her grandmother rolls dough, patient and unhurried. The first pie crust she made came out thick and uneven on one edge, and I watched Doreen take it in her hands, turn it over once, and say, without a trace of unkindness, "Try again." That's how your father learned too. He burned 3 cakes before he made one worth eating. I still drive sometimes, short runs now, nothing overnight, because my knees don't forgive the long hours the way they used to, and because Marcus finally convinced me the way he should have years ago that I've given this family enough foray. Mornings for one lifetime. Doreen still catches herself planning menus in her sleep, still wakes up some nights, and reaches for a legal pad before she remembers she doesn't have to prove anything to anyone anymore. I think about that dining room a lot, the 40 dishes going cold under the tent lights while everyone drove off to a restaurant instead. I think about how close we came to letting that be the last chapter of the story the night love got mistaken for an obligation and quietly discarded. I spent 69 years believing that staying quiet was the same as keeping a family together. It isn't. Silence doesn't protect anybody. It just waits, patiently, for someone to finally pay the bill that's been accumulating the whole time, and in my family, for far too long, that someone was always Doreen. If any part of what I told you tonight sounds like your own kitchen table, your own mother, your own grandmother who has spent a lifetime believing love has to be proven in portions, say something before the food goes cold on a table nobody sits down at. Don't wait the way I waited. Tell the person who feeds you that you see them, long before a stranger on your porch has to tell them for you. This has been a story about a family that almost let quiet love go unanswered, and about what it costs, and what it's worth, when somebody finally decides that silence has gone on long enough. If this reminded you of someone in your own life, tell me who: a mother, a father, a grandmother standing at her own stove at 4 in the morning. Leave it below, so they know somebody was thinking of them tonight. And if you're still here with me, I'll see you at the next table.